Well, hi everybody. I want to thank you for coming tonight. My name is Norm Boone. I'm the founder and president of Mosaic. So I'm really excited to be seeing all of you here tonight. You know, we do these things periodically throughout the year and throughout the years, and each of them is really special in its own way. I started Mosaic about 30 years ago after spending about 10 years being a CFO and a banker for a while, and just not being real satisfied with kind of things that I thought were meaningful in my life. And I, for a variety of reasons, found the Certified Financial Planner program and began to do some studying of those whole topics, and it resonated with me. And you know, hopefully each of you in your lives have found things that resonate with you. And for me, the things about financial planning, it was a great combination for me of, hello Norman. This is my friend Norman, and together we are the Normans. He is. You know, part of what resonated about the whole financial planning thing for me was really three elements. You know, for me, one, I love doing financial analysis and kind of running the numbers and seeing how things work and what the various possibilities are and doing all of that, and so that you can come with the right answer, right? But that's never enough. There's always a lot of information that needs to be passed between somebody who has the information and somebody who is seeking the information. So there's a teaching element to what we do in financial planning when we work with our clients. And ultimately, and why this is relevant to what Ruth is going to be talking about today, is a coaching side of things. I did a lot of coaching as my kids were growing up and was pretty successful at it. And part of what I believe about being a coach is your job is to find what the elements of each player or each employee is and how to make them each better. And to do it differently and do it in a way that works for each of them. And if you can do that and help the team become a team as well, you're going to do well in that regard. So for me, the real meaning in what we do as financial planners is helping people get to where they want to be from where they are. And usually the reason they come to us is because they're stuck at something. And so they need some help with some element, and our opportunity then is to help them find ways to make small or sometimes large changes in their lives so that they can begin to move forward so that they can find those things that are successful in their lives, so they can find meaning in their lives, so that they can be happy. And ultimately, that's really what we all want, is to be happy in what we do. So that's, for me, why Mosaic has been a wonderful place to be for the last nearly 30 years. And I'm really pleased to do that. One of the really special people in my life as a Mosaic employee, my number 2 person, my chief operating officer, Sabrina Lowell, who is going to be introducing a couple of other elements, is going to be talking now, and I'd like to introduce Sabrina. Oh, one other thing, for those of you that parked, you can see Channing in the back with her hand raised. If you want the chits that will pay for your parking, we're happy to pay for your parking, assuming that all of those things work out. So see Channing.
Thank you. Hi and welcome. In the 13 years that I've been with Mosaic, we've grown from 7 to now 20 employees. And what's been one of the really interesting and exciting things to see is that each of our employees have begun to build out an area of specialty. So what I'd like to share with each of you tonight is one of the areas, so maybe backing up a moment, we have people who work in the area of stock options and equity compensation planning. We have people who work with LGBT. We have people who work with young tech executives. And more recently, we have Mary Ballin and Liz Ravenko, who's going to come up in a moment, who are working in the area with women. And so one of the things that we've started to do is to build out campaigns specializing in information around these different segments of our client groups. And Q4 for us is really going to be focusing on women, and this event, sort of women in transition, although transition is really relevant to young, old, male, female. It goes across many different clients of ours, as well as friends and family members. So one of the things that we're doing in the Q4 campaign is we've developed what we're calling the Women's Guide, the Savvy Women's Guide to Finance, and it'll be available on our website. So as a follow-up to this, you'll be receiving a link to be able to download and potentially share that or look at it for yourself or for someone that you might know in your life that it could be relevant to. And it touches on a number of the areas that people should be aware of, everything from how to save, how to have conversations if you're in the sandwich generation, if you have aging parents, younger children who are coming back to live with you again, and some of the pieces of one's financial life that you may not otherwise be aware of. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Liz Ravenko, who is going to be introducing tonight's speaker. And thank you to each of you for being here.
Hello. Hello. No heckling from the front row. The back row, though, bring it on. In today's hectic, fast-paced, high-pressure world, does anyone ever really take the time to pause, reflect, and recalculate where they have been and, more importantly, where they are going? Our keynote speaker today, Ruth Ross, was a very successful human resources executive for 30 years at some of the world's foremost companies, both in New York City and San Francisco, including the last 10 of those years as an executive vice president at Wells Fargo Bank, until the day it changed. It all changed for her simply because she looked in the mirror. That eye-opening moment led her to speaking engagements around the country and also to write Coming Alive, The Journey to Reengage Your Life and Career. You may have noticed the signed copy in your chair, which she is gifting to you tonight. Please join me in warmly welcoming Ruth as she navigates us on the journey to come alive.
Thank you. So truly some of the warmest, loveliest people that I've met. So thank you. So let's dive right in. So you notice I use the word journey a lot. I've got it up on the title. I've got it on the book because travel is my passion. And journey is such a metaphor for life. And so I thought I'd start out by sharing with you a little travel story. Summer of 2007, my husband and I were traveling for 2 weeks in Italy with dear friends of ours that, to kind of protect the guilty, I'm going to refer to them as Ralph and Alice, because some of you in this room may get the honeymooners reference, right? Not all of you, I'm looking around, but the honeymooners. And Ralph and Alice, it was really cool because they had this deep, abiding love, but it was cloaked in a lot of bickering, right? And a lot of stubbornness. That was Ralph and Alice. So we go to Italy for 2 weeks. The first week, we were in some different parts where we had drivers and other people that took care of us, or water taxis in Venice. But we were spending a few days in Tuscany. And Ralph decided we were going to rent a car for a few days. So we got this great BMW with a GPS device that had a woman speaking in beautiful English, but with an Italian accent. So we thought we're all set. We're going to dinner one night. He plugs into the destination in the GPS device, and off we go into the beautiful countryside of Tuscany. And we're following, and the GPS is telling us to turn here and turn here. And Ralph was following. He was driving. Ralph and Alice were in the front seat. And all of a sudden, my husband and I turned to each other and said, this feels really funny. Like, we're not on the main road anymore. It's kind of this unpaved road. It's getting a little funky, but Ralph's driving because he didn't want to, get mad or not listen to the wonderful GPS lady who knows all, right? So we're driving, and we're getting scared. It's dark. It doesn't feel right. And we're saying, stop, turn around. And he's like, no, no, no. And we get to this point where it looks like we're going to go over a cliff. And we all start screaming. And his wife was screaming louder than the rest of us. And finally he figured out that the GPS lady had gone astray. So he turns the car around, and we start to come back down this now dirt road, and the headlights shine on this little bitty, gray-haired woman. Looked like she didn't weigh more than 90 pounds. Looked like she was up there in age, as some of us may be. And she was holding a shotgun, and it was pointed right at us. Okay, gun the car, quick, because it was right at us. And so we just bat out of hell we go. We start driving the car. We finally get to the end of the dirt road, where we never should have turned in the first place. And we see this little cafe on the corner, and there's 4 guys sitting outside drinking some vino. So we roll down the window because we're so excited to ask for real directions. And they were hysterical laughing because they knew what was down the road. We didn't. Okay, we finally get back on the road. We go to dinner. So why do I tell this story? It was life-changing for me because that's when I figured out that there is no GPS or roadmap to take us through life, right? And more importantly, I learned. Okay, there we go. It's not the destination, but rather it's the journey. And that really is a metaphor for life, right? It is truly not the destination. It's about the twists and the turns, because really what we're trying to do is to say it's a roadmap that has things like promotions, births, job changes, moving across the country, maybe getting laid off, right? But there's all these things, risking it all, ultimately looking for happiness, right? Because it's a curvy road. If you notice, it's not straight lines, right? Because things move, things take turns, they take detours. We can think about what we want to do, and I will tell you that those thoughts and questions, right, can start at a very early age. I've talked to kids on college campuses who have listened to me and said, you know, I'm doing this major because it's what my parents told me or my guidance counselor, but it's not really what I'm passionate about. I need to course correct before it's too late. I've heard this from millennials, I've heard it from Gen Xers, and certainly as a baby boomer, right? So it doesn't matter, it affects all of us. Because really what happens, you know, when you start off and we start our careers and we start thinking about, what do I want this to look like? And we start off on day one having an ideal of what it's going to look like. You know, when you started this business, you thought, what's it going to look like? I'm sure it's quite different, right? 30 years later. Nothing ever looks the same because on day one, it all looks great. But at some point, whether it's day 2, whether it's year 5, whether it's year 15, or in my case, year 30, roadblocks happen. They come out of nowhere, right? You don't expect them. You know, think about the metaphor of driving down a highway. You don't always know that something's going to happen. I hit my roadblock in 2010. As I think Liz, when she introduced me, said, I was an executive vice president of HR at Wells Fargo. We all know what happened in 2008. I don't need to remind this room, right, of people what happened. And here I was actually the head of HR for the CFO of the company. So I felt like I had a front row seat to what was going on. Craziness abounds. Wells purchases Wachovia. So I'm on a plane a lot to Charlotte, lovely city, but when you don't get to see it because the hotel is in the office complex, you start to worry, right? So what happened was one day in the fall of 2010, I was home alone getting ready for work. My husband left to go to the gym as he does in the morning before he went to work. And I was doing my normal routine. You know, I took a shower, I go to my vanity where the mirror is, I'm getting ready to put on my makeup, comb my hair, and I looked in the mirror and I just stopped cold. And I looked in the mirror and I had this moment. I said some things that I can't, the words I can't use, right, in a mixed audience. But suffice to say, I'm dead inside. I knew it. I said, I am on empty. I feel completely dead. And I've lost the passion for what I've known and done for 30 years. And it was such an epiphany moment for me, because calling it out and saying it out loud, actually screaming it out loud, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I couldn't ignore the signs of what was happening. And what started to happen was, at that point, all these questions came into my mind. What does this mean? Can I ignore it? Do I need to do something about it? And I knew in that moment, my life was literally never going to be the same. Because what was really clear to me at that point was I was completely stuck in a pit of quicksand. And I had diagnosed my own disengagement. Really clear. I'm a doctor's daughter, so I kind of think I'm a doctor. And I had diagnosed it. And I knew with absolute clarity I was in that quicksand. So I came home from work that night, turned to my husband, and I said, honey, I got to tell you what happened. And I told him, and he listened to me, and he said, okay, so what does that mean? What do you think? And I said, while it's not tomorrow, I need to walk away. I know that I need to vote myself off the corporate island, and I knew it with certainty. And being the wonderful guy he was, he said, you do what you need to do. And I said, okay, you were the first person I talked to, but tomorrow I need to make the really important phone call. And that was actually to my financial planner. And I called Michelle, and I said, I need to come and see you because I'm thinking about walking away, and I need to know if I can do that. Trusted partner of mine had been working with us, and I said, here's some information you don't have, because she didn't have every little thing. In terms of there was some inheritance coming or something she may not have known about, but she had most of my stuff. And 2 days later, I drove out to meet with her. I sat in her office and said, can I walk away? And she said, yes. Such a great partner. Okay, that was easy. Now the hard part comes. I need to tell my parents. We all, right? Our parents are everything. Well, in that case, my parents at the time, I have to figure this out, calculation, about 88 and 85. And we're had just moved to an assisted living facility in Richmond, Virginia, because they're suffering with some medical and mental issues. And I go there. Now, I've got depression-era parents, right? And I sit down and I have this conversation. And I start to talk about, this is what I want to do. So you can only imagine the inquisition I got about, do you have enough money? Are you okay? Do you have a will and a trust, right, Sam? Do you have, long-term care insurance? I mean, you name it. They did an inquisition that was worse than any auditor would ever do with me. And I'm like, yeah, this is great. Don't worry about it. I'm fine. I met with my partners. I know everything is okay. So my father thought for a bit, kind of took a deep breath, and he said, okay, so I get that. That feels better, but I don't really understand. Why? And I said, because I lost the passion for what I do. That he got. Because my father was a man that was passionate about what he did every single day of his life. And he got it. And when I saw this quote, it really resonated with me. Because passion, we went too far. Passion really is the difference between having a job and having a career. When you think about it, when people enter the workplace today, right, they go, and many of them just want to find a job. I call it a job. And a job is really about finances, right? That's your demarcation. Did I make enough money? What am I earning? It's all about that. And then as you morph, a career becomes about prestige and maybe titles and accomplishments and all the things that come along with all of that. But passion is really about a calling, about a meaning. And I knew with absolute certainty at that point, while I had been really successful at what I did, and it gave me a lot of that kind of stuff, my calling now was to really work with others to eradicate the disengagement disease. So let's take a step back and say, well, what is this whole thing, right? And so let me start with engagement and talk about this. If you asked 100 people what the word engagement is, how many of you would say, oh, it's when I got down on one knee or someone proposed to me, right? That's engagement. That's that commitment between two people. Or it's meshing of gears or engaging in war. These are the kinds of definitions that people think about, right? In the workplace, this is what the definition that's most commonly used around that loyalty and that connection, that emotional connection. And the examples I would give, think about a doctor who tells you she doesn't just practice medicine, but she saves lives. Or an attorney who doesn't just practice being a personal injury attorney, but stands up for others who can't. Or maybe it's a chef of a mom and pop restaurant who gets up at the crack of dawn every morning to make pasta from scratch, just like their Nona taught them in the old country. That's engagement. That's that passion that we all hope for when we start this journey. But the best definition of all came from my 90-year-old mother-in-law who suffers from Alzheimer's. When I started working on the book and I was finishing things, my husband was talking to her one day, and she asked about me, and he said, Mom, I'm so proud. Ruth finished writing her book, and she said, what's it about? And he just took a deep gulp and thought, how do I explain to my mother, who hasn't been in the corporate workplace in 65 years, who's got Alzheimer's, what employee engagement is? So takes a glass of water, dives in, and he's ready to tell her what employee engagement is. And 4 words in, she stops him, and she said, employee engagement is when you have employees who are hands-on and have their hearts open. I got chills when he called and told me that. Because what I'm finding over time is that's really what it's about, right? It's about engaging the hearts and minds of the people that work for us and with us, right? So in the business world, there really is a return on investment of having engaged employees. And the value proposition is simply this. Engaged employees are more productive. And if you're more productive, it's going to lead to higher customer satisfaction, which ultimately leads to an increased profitability, and hopefully, since I am a Wells Fargo shareholder still, and many of you may have stock in companies, higher shareholder value. Right. What's really interesting is there are 3 categories of engagement. There are people that are highly engaged, which is 31% of the US population. These are figures coming from the Gallup organization, who really are the granddaddy of all things engagement. 51% identify as disengaged, 17.5% actively disengaged, 68.5% of the US population, right? Only 31.5%. That's US based. And an even more sobering statistic is that globally, on a worldwide basis, only 13% of the workforce is engaged. I don't know how we operate, right? As a country, if you think about all of this. And another statistic I'll share with you, going back to the US statistics, is that the cost in the US alone due to lost productivity because of this is approaching $550 billion a year. Pretty staggering. So what are engaged employees? What do they look like, right? You want a team of highly engaged employees, which I know you have, right? Highly engaged employees are collaborative. They really want to work together. They look for opportunities to partner. But they're also really creative. And I like to say that engaged employees ignite growth and disengaged ones extinguish the flame. but they're also loyal, right? Lassie. So what are disengaged employees? Disengaged employees are really order takers, and they're task focused. That was me when I realized I was disengaged, right? I was getting everything done, checking off the boxes, but my full heart and soul wasn't in it. And they're also fence sitters, right, where they're not sure what they want to be that day. And these are people who, honestly, are smiling on the outside, but they're crying on the inside. So you may not know what's happening, right? But the actively disengaged, I like to call them the saboteurs. These are the ones speaking out, and they're really toxic. They're impacting the workplace, and they're really into the blame game. It's somebody else's fault. It's never their fault. And these kind of employees are really hard, to turn around. It's not going to happen, right? So I wouldn't devote a huge heck of amount of time to them because it's really hard to change that. So I get asked all the time by business leaders and others, so okay, you're this expert on engagement, like how do I engage my people? And I like to say to get to the magic of engagement, because it's really about magic, are really 5 key things that employees today really want. And what they really want is they want meaning. Now, we hear that with millennials all the time, but I got to tell you, it isn't just about millennials. People want to work for organizations that provide that meaning. I use an example a lot of a company out of Southern California called Tom's Shoes. Right? Some of you may have bought from Tom's. What's great about Tom's is for every pair of shoes you buy, they donate a pair to someone in need. For every bag of coffee you buy, they give water to people in need. Warby Parker now, if you buy glasses, they'll donate to people in need. That's meaning. But people also really want is alignment. They want to understand the big picture, right? And they want to figure out, where do I fit in? And I got to tell you, this isn't just about for-profit companies. Think about people that devote their careers in the nonprofit world for very little pay, but it has meaning and alignment and a mission. And think about sports teams, right? Here we are in the Bay Area. Think about it. The San Francisco Giants, 3 championships in 5 years. The Golden State Warriors, right? What did they all have in common? They were all aligned against the exact same goal and mission. They knew exactly, and they were emotionally connected, loyal, and all in on what they wanted to do. And they won. Not this year for the Giants, but we still have the Warriors, so we're good. I'm a big fan, so I was so happy last year. But they also want growth. And many of us in this room are baby boomers. And when we started in the workplace with baby boomers, it was all about a career ladder. I was an HR assistant and specialist and manager and VP and SVP and EVP. And somewhere along the line, somebody got really smart and kicked the crap out of that ladder and said, that's not what it's about. It's about growing a portfolio of skills. It's about moving laterally and taking new assignments and figuring things out and saying, I just want to learn, right? And the other thing people want, and frankly, this isn't just in the workplace. This stuff can work at home too. They want input. People have a voice, they want to use it. When you're at the top of the house in an organization, who knows the customers better than your frontline employees, right? Who's talking to the people that matter? People want input. And now, hopefully, this is a very intelligent crowd, so hopefully you figured out that at some point I'm spelling the word magic. It's just so transparent, right? So I'm going to end with my most important and favorite word, and that's context. So let me ask a question. How many people in this room either have children or were a child themselves? Right? So when you ask a child to do something, what's the first question they say back to you? Why? But they do it with a really whiny voice, right? It's like, why? That happens all the time. It's no different in the workplace. If you tell people what to do, tell them why you're doing it. If you want them to go along with you, always focus on the why behind the what. If anybody does that, and even take that into the home environment, right? your spouse, your children. You can get so much more with this, right? If you've got bad news to share in a company, like maybe you're laying people off, rather than people run around and go, I need to get my resume together, Chicken Little, the sky is falling. If you had a conversation with people and said, so we've looked at the competitive landscape and we don't think we should be in this particular part of the business, but we're going to reallocate resources to this other part, and there's more opportunities. The why behind the what. And my favorite story on the positive side is, I worked for a company that shall remain nameless because it was a little embarrassing what they did. They were a great company, had a great year. And they said, we want to give back. We're going to make a surprise profit-sharing contribution to the employees. Fantastic. I was part of a team that worked on this. We crafted this great message, thanking people, telling them why we were doing this. And then somebody pushed the button to deposit all the checks before the letter went out. So the money shows up and a bunch of things happened. Some people called the HR call center and said, I got this money, I don't think it's mine, what does this mean? Some people went immediately to the bank and withdrew the money, right? Because they're thinking, I'm gonna do this. What a missed opportunity, right? What could have been an incredibly engaging moment became a disengaging moment because of that, right? So context is just so incredibly important. And so I like to think about engagement as kind of this seesaw, right? Where different moments can cause people to go from one to another. You can slide at any given point from one into another. And along the way, stuff happens, big boulders in the road, right? Company shutting down, getting moved somewhere, layoffs, things happening, big boulders, but also small things. And the analogy I use here is, I think disengagement's like a series of paper cuts. My boss yelled at me today in front of other people, paper cut. I got a bad performance review, paper cut. This is the 4th reorganization in 2 years, and this one's dumber than the previous 3. Paper cut, right? And what happens with a paper cut, as you know, it doesn't bleed, but it stings, especially if you get like lemon in it, and then it's like really awful, right? But when you get paper cut on top of paper cut on top of paper cut, it goes deep, and it forms a hard scar that's hard to turn around. And this is what's happening to so many people today, and our children, and this is why these numbers are so bad. It's just paper cuts all over the place. And there really are, I call them the 5 underlying causes of why people tend to disengage. You know, the job's not what was promised. It's not what we expected when we started out on this journey. Or there's no room for growth, I'm getting stuck, right? Maybe my compensation hasn't moved, I'm stuck in place. And how hard is it to say thank you? How hard it is to use a remote, right? In any language. This is one of the hardest things for people to do, and frankly, at home too. How many times do we think to thank someone for something they've done? Why is it so darn hard? People that don't feel appreciated and recognized are not going to be engaged. Or maybe you've got a bad boss, well-meaning, because every day around the world, really great individual contributors are tapped on the shoulder and someone says, congratulations, you're now a manager. Well, do they wake up the next morning and go, hey, I totally get it. I know how to do a performance review. I know how to handle a sexual harassment complaint. I know how to do all of this. No, they don't. It takes resources, time and dollars and others to get people up to speed. So there's a heck of a lot of bad managers in the workplace today, even if they are well-meaning. Right? And a lot of times you'll hear, and there's a lot of debate about this, do people leave companies or they leave managers, right? Big debate out there. And the final one is these folks. Big, ugly, lonely losers yearning for attention. So I won the lottery when it came to bully bosses. I had 4 of them in my career. And here's the really ugly secret. You know, we hear so much about what's happening to our schools, right? Our kids at the playground and on the buses and all of that kind of stuff. You hear things about, you know, the people in colleges and everything. But the real secret is the largest majority of bullying in the world today is in the workplace. So now that you've kind of gotten this, we're rushing through a lot of quick primer here on what's really going on in the world. So how do you figure it out? I looked in a mirror, right? So I saw it in the mirror. But along the way, as you're driving on this journey, are there warning signs? So I don't know about you, but when I'm driving my car and I see one of those lights go on the dashboard, I quickly find a place to pull over because I freak out a little bit, right? And I either go into the computer in the car or, God forbid, I go the old-fashioned route. I pull the manual out of the glove compartment and I try and match the picture with the word, right? And in this world of engagement and what's happening in the world today, there are warning signs on the dashboard. So let's go through some of these. So the first one is an I don't care attitude, right? Hey, thanks, but I kind of don't care. I'm just sort of showing up. Or maybe I'm going to come in late, leave early, take longer lunches, just kind of less time doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Or low productivity, right? These are all things you can see. And by the way, a lot of these apply again to home. Mood swings, right? Riding that roller coaster. Isolating yourselves, and that can take many forms. It can be not joining in hallway conversations or going out to lunch. It could be sitting in a meeting. I was famous for this. Arms folded, not contributing when I was really in the throes of this. Or it could be something as simple as, not wanting to engage with my loved ones when I got home at night. Lack of creativity and innovation. And overall being lethargic and low energy. And if we really look for this, they're going to be flashing all over the place. Okay. So what happens? So disengagement doesn't discriminate. I get asked all the time, is this just a jaded old person's kind of thing? Or is this, millennials who just, are dissatisfied with a lot of stuff that's going on and are constantly pushing for change? It doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter if you're young or old, black or white, on the East Coast, on the West Coast, if you're a manager, a secretary, or a CEO. And this really came home to me in a really big way. A couple of years ago, I have a client in Salt Lake City that I go out there a lot. And from the Bay Area to get to Salt Lake City, if you're not on Southwest, you're usually on one of these smaller planes, kind of the 2 and 2, right, where everybody's crunched in like sardines. And I always sit in the aisle. So I'm in my aisle seat, just kind of doing my thing, and the guy comes up to get into the window seat next to me. Guy about maybe early 30s. And when he went to put his bag, he had a small bag up in the overhead, the computer he was holding in his arms slipped and hit me in the head. No blood, it's okay. But it was kind of like, ooh. So he sat down, and of course he felt just horrible. And he opens his computer to do some work, and he's starting to talk with me. And he opens the screen, and the first thing I see is the logo from my former company. I thought, okay, you hit me in the head, now this. And so we started chatting, and I said, do you work for them? And he said, no, I'm actually in the advertising business. I make videos for corporations. They're one of my clients. He said, do you work for them? And I said, well, I used to. And he said, what do you do now? And I said, well, I'm actually in the process of writing a book. I'm interviewing people who are disengaged in the workplace. And he says to me, you need to interview me because I'm really disengaged. So he gave me his card. We chatted a few more minutes. He went back to work, and I went back to reading my Us magazine. Thank you. Because, hey, that's good, right? That's what I do because I'm not in a full-time job anymore. So about 10 minutes go by, and I get a tap on my right shoulder. And I look over, and it's the woman sitting in the aisle across from me. She whispers to me, I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I'm going through the same thing, and I'm actually relocating from Salt Lake City to San Francisco to take a new job with my company so that I can hopefully kind of get out of this funk. Now, this was an African-American woman, probably in her mid-40s. So I looked at her and I said, well, what do you do? Who do you work for? And she went like this. Shh. And she pointed to the lapel pin on her shirt. It was the airline we were flying on. I'm like, okay, here's my card, right? So I go back to my Us magazine. We get off and get to Salt Lake City, and this was one of those planes where if you had a carry-on that was a decent size, you had to get it on the jetway. So I'm lined up on the jetway, and this striking woman comes up to me, looked to be about in her early 60s, and she said, I didn't want to eavesdrop either, but I was sitting right behind you, and I just took early retirement because I had lost the passion for what I do. Turned out she lived a block from me. We had coffee, had a chance to talk, and I kept thinking to myself, what if I got on the loudspeaker? How many people would raise their hand? So I just think that's a microcosm for, and thankfully the guy next to me wasn't like one of those, but I just thought this was such a microcosm for what goes on. And so take this out of the workplace for a second. When I was writing the book, I thought I was going to write a business book and think about, and I have lots of stuff in there for managers and tools and things people can do, but what became really clear to me was you can't compartmentalize your life. What happens at work affects you at home. What happens at home affects you at work. Everything, right? When you're dealing with something, let's say it's financial stress, right? You've been meeting with your planner and you're not close to meeting your goals yet. You're stressed about that. Your children are driving you crazy, right? Your relationship is going through some challenges. All those are stressors. When you get dressed in the morning to go into work, without you maybe knowing it, that stress gets dressed with you and goes into the office. Conversely, when I was at work, I mentioned I had some bully bosses, right? So if I dealt with some rude comment that day or some situation that was uncomfortable, I'd bring that home with me. And I'd get home and my husband would say, oh, honey, let's go out to a nice dinner tonight. And I'd be like, I don't even feel like eating. Can you just order Thai food? And I'd go in the bedroom, close the door, and I'd do one of two things. Either I'd aimlessly go onto my iPad, or I'd play remote control roulette on the television, not even caring what I was doing, because I didn't want to connect. And I found myself having more and more of those moments. And that's what happens, right? Because when you determine, like I did, that I had to admit what was happening in that mirror, and you admit that you're disengaged, there are some choices that come up. And there are really three choices that happen. And those choices are, you can admit it and say, you know what, I'm calling it out, I'm acknowledging it, but I can't do anything about it. Because a lot of people in the world today, and hopefully not any of us in this room, but a vast majority of people are working just to survive, not to thrive, right? And can't make this change. Or you can say, you know what, I'm going to go talk to someone, my boss, maybe HR, because if I just tweak one little thing, it might reignite that spark in me. I call it job sculpting. And sometimes it's not big, right? It's just doing a different project, or maybe I could have supported a new client group in my HR role. Or the third one is, I need to walk away. Now, I knew I needed to walk away, but that doesn't mean I left that day. What it meant was, you need to be thoughtful and strategic and planful, right? Calling my financial planner and saying, what do I need to do, and my accountant, right? They're passengers on this journey with me, right? So being thoughtful, strategic, planful. What do I want to do? There are people here, I know I've talked to some today, that have walked away and started new things, or are thinking about, you know, I'm not quite ready for retirement yet, and I still want to do some stuff. That's where the thoughtful, strategic, planful comes in. How do I monetize what my passion is? Those are the kinds of things And the best advice I give people, starting really young, especially when kids come out and go into their first job, it is imperative to start saving for retirement really early. I get that. It is the smartest thing anyone can do. But I also want people to save for a walk-away fund. There's some other names people use for it, but I'm going to be clean here, right? But the idea behind this is you want choices in life, right? It's all about having choices and thinking about this and not feeling like that picture before about the quicksand, right? And not thinking about that pit of quicksand. If you have options and you have choices, because what is so important is I want people to not just run away from something, but I want them to walk towards something better. So before we wrap with something else, I'd love to just pause here and maybe see if there's any questions, any comments from people. Liz, anybody? Come on. Don't be shy. Now, I know there's some people that have gone through this. Thank you so much. What's your name?
Alexis.
Alexis, thank you. Go ahead.
So after you had your epiphany in the mirror, how long was it before you actually left?
So the question is, after you had your epiphany in the mirror, how long was it before you left? 10 months, right? So it doesn't always happen overnight. And in my case, so I really thought about it. And the first thing I did was literally take out a piece of paper, clean sheet of paper, and a pen. I know that sounds so old-fashioned, right? And what I did was I had 2 columns. I said deal breakers and kind of what am I passionate about. And I knew my deal breakers, I never wanted another boss again, right? I wanted to work for myself. I knew what my passions were about. I wanted to try and write. I wanted to talk about this. I wanted to help others. And I kept thinking about how do I monetize this? How do I do some stuff, right? I was fortunate. I didn't have to go back into a full-time role, but I wanted to make something out of this. And I kept waiting for the right moment, and I knew that because of the acquisition and cost cutting, I knew there would be some reorganizations. And when something finally came up, I was able to go, wait a second, you move some things around, take me, and be able to keep my entire team of 14 because they wanted to be there, because they were passionate and engaged and aligned. So it was 10 months, start to finish. So during that time, I just kept planning. I kept thinking about what's my landing gear, right? Question? Yes, Norm.
So one of the things that we see is that people are moving away from something and they move to retirement and it's not all that they were hoping for and expecting. How do you advise to help people make that transition so that it can be more what they hope and expect?
So the question, if you haven't heard it in the back, was a lot of times that walking away for people is to head towards retirement, but then they find it's not all it's cracked up to be. So fascinating timing, because last night I was having a glass of wine with a very dear friend of mine that I used to work with, who's been a great support of mine. And we're chatting about some stuff and talking about what I'm doing, and he looked at me and he goes, so you do realize you've got like another 40 years, right? And I just thought, oh, I so hate you for saying this. But for me, it goes back to that paper and pen exercise, because I had to figure out what I was passionate about and what I wanted to do. And that passion, for me, was not golf. Let me be honest, I really stink at that game, right? And I knew that there were things I liked to do, but I also knew that I still had something inside of me that I could share with others that had meaning and impact. And so while that may morph over time, it was about literally identifying those 3 or 4 things. And then I just had a conversation with someone today about possibly going onto a board. I've been on boards of nonprofits, and I thought, here's another way of giving back with what I know. And so for me, it's just, it didn't all have to happen at once. 3 years ago, I wouldn't have said to you I wanted to be on another board. Things just change over time, and I just keep that list. That's how I do it. Now, that could change, but that's how I see it now. Yes, thanks.
Ruth, I think it takes a lot of courage to decide to make this change. Can you talk about what kind of, were you scared? Were you outside of your comfort zone? How you dealt with that?
I was so scared. It's a great question. I'd get up a lot, like at 4 a.m, thinking, am I crazy? And I kept saying to Michelle, who's my partner on the finance side, are you sure? Like, I don't want to be a homeless bag lady. Like, please tell me this is okay. Now, mind you, we had just come off of everything with 2008. We had stayed the course. So, as we all know, anybody who stayed the course really came out quite fine. I saw her about maybe a couple weeks ago for lunch with another friend, and the first thing she said to me, knowing the market we've been in now, you're going to be okay, I promise you, right? So I have those moments. But I had such great support, because as I said, thank you, you're not on this journey alone. I had such support that I just kind of talked things through. And really what I had to think about as well was, how much does one really need, right? Because I think we all get so caught up in the next big mansion or this and that, and along the way, you think about what's important to you, and it started to shift my values a little bit. And I've always been kind of a saver and not a big spender, except for travel, right? My big vice. I just had to kind of change a little bit and think about what was more important. But sure, I still get scared. But I knew with conviction, and when I started talking to other people who felt the way I did, and the response I've gotten to the book, or when I've been interviewed or done things, and the impact that I've had with people, that gives me the courage to keep going. So thank you. So let me do this, just in light of timing. I want to wrap with a little bit of a personal story, and I'd be happy to talk with people offline, because I really appreciate the gift of time. So I've said all along on this journey that I didn't do it alone, right? Passengers in the car, my financial planner, our accountant, our attorneys, friends and family, right? It really does take a village, to quote our friend Hillary, right? It does take a village, because you can't do it alone, and that's what gives me more of that courage, right? And so one of the things that my husband and I had done was every year we would do a review with our planner. I would come to our house, and we'd sit down and we'd talk about where we wanted to go. What was our bucket list? What was our search for the brass ring? And they will tell you, anyone who's worked with us will say, travel, 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 and more travel, right? And our list of things. And this next slide, oops, sorry, questions, we've already done that. These next couple slides were taken in Paris at my favorite carousel. And riding this carousel was really important because it was an analogy for the brass ring, for what we wanted out of life and what we wanted to do together. And if anyone's been there, this is just so incredibly beautiful. And so riding that brass ring and talking about the kinds of things and the kind of life and what we wanted to do was so important because it was all about the brass ring. February 8th of 2015, that brass ring got snatched away from me when my husband and best friend of almost 26 years died suddenly of a brain aneurysm. And I tell you this story not to feel sorry for me, but I tell you because I think there's a really important message to this. 4 years earlier, I hopped off this merry-go-round because I had disengaged and I had lost that connection with him and lost valuable time. And when I made the decision to walk away and have that courage to go after this new part of my life, were the best 4 years we had ever had. And those discussions about what we wanted to do. And our ultimate goal as our estate attorney, and planners and others can tell you, our stated goal was that we wanted to be in our 80s on a cruise ship sailing around the world, right, for 4 months and go together. That was our end goal. kind of didn't work out that way. But the message of this and the legacy that my husband left me was that we need to grab for that brass ring because it's really precious. And you need to cherish every moment and be prepared for that. And that's why I call this reflections and recalculations, right? Reflecting back on everything and now recalculating, right? Where do I go from here? And because of all those smart decisions, right, I have choices now. And it's so important that I want people to understand that being stuck, you lose precious time with those you love. And since he recently, another famous person recently passed away, Yogi Berra, right? We all know Yogi, immortal. Had some of the greatest lines ever known to man. This is one of my favorites that I'm going to leave you with. When you get to the fork in the road, take it. Because that's how you recalculate. That's how you re-engage. So I want to thank you so much for the time tonight. I hope it's been thought-provoking. And I turn it back to you all, Norm. Thank you. Oh. And by the way, that's me. If anyone would like to connect or reach out, please feel free. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, am I supposed to take the mic?
Yes, so here's the mic.
Leslie, get my back. I'm not going to try and clip it. I'm just going to hold it up here. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Ruth, thank you so much. I'm sure this touched very close to home for many, many, if not all, of the people that are here this evening. There are a couple of things that I want to remind you of that were just mentioned. Don't forget to see Channing for parking. Okay, she's got the magic green dot for your ticket. Ruth is offered to stay around and sign the books for anybody who is interested. And don't hesitate to go back and have another drink after all of this and find your advisor and chat with them a little bit about what you heard tonight and any lessons that you are taking away and listening to this presentation. So I want to tell you about a journey that my colleague Liz Ravenko and I started on about 2 years ago. We were introduced to this concept of women conversation circles and I know, sorry guys, we're leaving you out of it, but this is for women. Women have a tendency to not participate as much in their financial well-being as men do. Either consciously or subconsciously, they become a passive part of it. But more than 70% of the time, we're the ones taking care of the financial matters when something happens in our life. Sometimes it's divorce. Sometimes it's like Ruth. All of a sudden you lose your other partner. When that happens, those women all of a sudden go, oh my God, what am I supposed to do? He's been taking care of everything. Well, Liz and I entered this journey to change the conversation about money with women. And for the last couple of years, we've been hosting women conversation circles every month, crossing back and forth across the Bay, 1 month in San Francisco, 1 month in the East Bay, which is where I work. These conversation circles are about women doing what women do best, getting together and talking, getting together and collaborating, getting together, sharing stories, sharing concerns, sharing fears, and finding out that they're not alone. It's amazing what we have found coming out of that in the success of these women's circles that we've been hosting. So with that, I want to invite anybody here or anybody that you may know, woman that you know, that may benefit from joining us for one of these conversation circles. And just reach out to us and let us know, and we'll get you on the list to invite, because they are wonderful. There is experiences that come out of those circles, and what happens in circle stays in circle.
What was that?
Yep, no, I'm getting there. And with that said, after tonight's presentation, In November, Ruth has graciously offered to come and help facilitate one of these conversations here in our San Francisco office. So please, if you've enjoyed the speaking engagement tonight and what Ruth's message is, please let us know if you'd like to join us for the conversation circle in November, on November the 12th. We would love to have you and to be part of the circle and become part of our women's circle community that we are starting to grow. With that, I just want to thank you again for coming, and go back and get another drink.